Howdy, this is Sam Gillespie. I write about real estate and politics for The Advocate, and today here in the Advocate Conference Room I'm joined by our incumbent councilman David Blewett from District 14. Thanks, Dave, for joining us.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
We're going to get right in it. Dave, since the last city council election 2 years ago when you ran,
Right.
what did Dallas and the city council do really, really right?
Mm-hmm.
And what did they do really, really wrong?
Wow, that's a big question. What did we do right? You know, the past year or two has been bumpy. It's been very bumpy. If you go back and look at COVID, that last March, you look at the protests in May, you look at the police response to it throughout May and June, you then look at the election and just a lot of chaos in general. You look at the snowpocalypse, what they call it, this past month or two. It's been a constant stream of new challenges, and I will say that the Emergency Management Office, Rocky Vaz, a lot of city staffers have done a really good job of managing, whether it was the pandemic, whether it was the vaccine rollout, where we had communication problems between the city, between the county, between the governor. We have actually been reactive and responsive to a lot of challenges. Some people, sometimes it's hard to see the successes, but there have been a lot of people downtown working very hard on a lot of complex issues. We've made progress on them, but it's been very difficult, and I want to get that message out there that a lot of people care, and a lot of people work very hard to keep the city functioning during a very difficult time.
All right, well, so is that the right part, or that's the really, really right?
That's the right part, because
What
it's
do you think?
reactive to what's been going on.
And so what did the council do really, really wrong?
The council, I think we've given
Or the city?
Well, I mean, since this is a council position, you know, I can speak about staff and how well they've done and how the council has worked with different departments. But where we got it wrong is I think that there is a separation between, I'll say, the mayor and certain council people on communicating what it is that we are doing, what it is that we should be doing. The easiest example of that is the vaccine. Mm-hmm. You had different messages from different people, including on council, where people were confused, and my office got blown up. I got email after email about people saying, where's the vaccine? How come I can't get on a list? And we had to navigate that in terms of cleaning up the communication efforts. The city actually did pretty well considering this is new. We didn't have a roadmap of how to do this. But I don't think we did a very good job communicating.
Okay, thanks. So, Dave, this spring, this summer, in the heat of this social justice movement and the protest, there was a lot of discussion about defunding the police. You saw that
Sure.
phrase in a million times on a bunch of different platforms. And then subsequently, during the fall budget process, the city police budget was under discussion, and it actually went from $501 million to $560 million. I did a story on that and reported
Sure,
it.
it went up.
And it went up.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
what are the dynamics and complexities of those two events and the intersection there?
District 14 took the brunt of the protests. It was largely downtown, it was largely uptown. There was some violence, there was some gunshots, and so a lot of districts around the city didn't have the impact that we did. So that was problematic. In terms of the defund movement across the country, there are a lot of other cities, Austin, Portland, Seattle, Minneapolis, who went pretty aggressive on defunding the police, and it became a national story. So then when you looked at what we were trying to do, we were trying to do more with less. I mean, quite frankly, our police budget should be higher. We are down about 500 or 600 officers. Mm-hmm. It costs about $100,000 per officer by the time you take salaries and benefits and put it all together. So if you want to hire the 500 officers that we need to raise the budget by about $50 million. Now, in that same environment, we have, because of COVID, we have shrunk our police training classes. So we are only doing 4 classes a year. They're a max of 25. The last class that graduated, I believe, was 18 or so. So you're looking at recruits that are not replenishing the attrition rate of existing officers. That's a problem. We have been using overtime as our budget as a stopgap, as a Band-Aid, to try and do more with existing officers. So then you could take an officer and have him on the street an extra 2, 4, 6 hours, whatever it is, and then you kind of get a little more out of that individual officer. I think that's problematic. I think it's not an efficient use of our funds. I would much prefer hiring more officers, but we don't have 50 million, and we don't have training classes to bring up those numbers of people. So what we did creatively is we looked at the overtime budget, and we looked at a KPMG study that we got this past year or so that told us civilianization, changing priority calls, doing efficiencies with existing resources is a good way to do this. So we took a little bit, 25% of the overtime budget, applied it to what they call civilianization. We identified 95 sworn officers who were doing desk jobs. And we were able to get them out onto the street and hire replacements as a civilian, non-sworn officer. And it got more officers on the street. That was a creative way of doing more with less. Now, because of the national narrative, a lot of people tried to take advantage of it. They tried to say, oh, well, we defunded or we cut. We did more with less. It was an efficiency move. It's become political. People are trying to take advantage of it because other forces around the country really did cut. They cut their manpower and they cut their budgets substantially. We did not.
So Dave, in your mind, what do you think affordable housing is? What's your definition of it? And is there a path to that in East Dallas?
That's a great question, and I think it gets misinterpreted because affordable housing means different things to different people.
Right.
You know, I talk quite a bit about my first house in the M Streets. We paid about $200,000 for it. It's now worth about $800,000. It's a 1,700 square foot, 2-bedroom, 2-bath with no garage. It's a great house. It's a cute house, but I mean, $800,000. I worry quite a bit about the young families, the young people that are trying to move into this area, and that's what they would look at as a first home. It's changing the demographics of our area because it's become so desirable and so expensive. So there's an affordability thing that is being able to buy a house. There's something else that we don't talk a lot about, which is the affordability of being able to stay in a house. Now, we have a comprehensive housing plan that talks about building more and more and more, but our dirt is so expensive that by nature, our values are just going to be higher than other parts of the city. So I've focused more on the affordability of, particularly as we age, right? Your property taxes go up every year. I've voted twice to cut the property tax rate. I made a proposal that passed in the last budget process to reduce the tax ceiling of the rate. So it's 3 times that I voted to lower everyone's tax rates. And I have an over 65 tax exemption that's coming through council right now. And that will be at full council in April. And what it will do is it will freeze taxes, city property taxes, for people over the age of 65. So you'll still pay taxes, it just won't go up 10% a year like it has been, because I hear from people all the time that they're being squeezed out of their homes. That's a housing affordability issue that's very important to me, that on council I can play a role in.
Right. Okay, thanks for that, Dave. All right, so the District 14 ferry shows up tomorrow and gives you $10 million. What do you do with it?
Be nice if you gave me these questions in advance. I've never had that question before. I don't know who this ferry is. I'd like to meet her, him, whoever it is.
And
$10 million.
And if he or she has any brothers or sisters, I think it's.
You know, the easy answer is quality of life, because that's what they call a shovel ready. You know, if you gave me $10 million and said, could I hire a bunch of officers? That's problematic. It would take a year. If we're going to put it into roads, there's not a lot of roads that we could put in for $10 million. Right. We're already fixing potholes. We have a budget for that, so it wouldn't go there. But quality of life, I mean, I've had some money, and I've been able to put in lit up crosswalks. It's one of my big things. You look around District 14, you'll see we've restriped a lot of crosswalks. We've put in flashing, they call them hawks. And over at Teetsy Park, Lakewood Library, Greenville Avenue, Oak Lawn, we've put in about a half a dozen of them, because areas that kids want to get to, schools, parks, rec centers, that's something I can spend money on. And I would spend more money on that because this city is becoming more bikeable, more walkable, more connected. And the best thing we can do is allow people a safe way of crossing streets, of getting to where they want to go. I'd spend the money on safe pedestrian improvements and enhancements like lit up crosswalks. I'd put in more.
All right, good.
And they're more expensive than you think.
I believe that.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Richmond as my last question.
Richmond. I know a little bit about Richmond. Yeah.
I know you do. It's an important street in District 14. But it does highlight the competing interest of these capital improvements, right?
Oh, very much. Yeah.
So right now, you know, we have one option that adds bike lanes, narrows the traffic lanes, eliminates one side of parking.
Right.
And the other option, which all the residents were able to vote on, had wider traffic lanes, no bike lanes, parking on both sides of the
Right.
issue. I mean, two pretty binary choices.
Correct.
I've had a chance, so where do you stand on those improvements?
Well, we've had 2 staff-led community meetings. So I've hosted them, I've helped put them together, but they are run by city staff, Public Works, as we've started out with 5 options, not 2, started out with 5, and then through a process of surveys and getting community input, narrowed it down to 2. I can tell you that both of them are problematic. One of the things about having this job is you get to define the job how you see fit. And there's been a big argument on whether you're a neighborhood first councilman or you're more of a city oriented councilman. That's been a debate that's been going on for decades. To be an effective councilman, I've decided you have to be taking consideration primarily for the neighborhoods. That's the job. It's neighbors and neighborhoods. I am real close to making a decision on where I would go. My primary focus on Richmond is slowing it down. The primary way of doing that is to narrow the lanes, to put in speed tables, which are elongated speed bumps. We're going to have lit up crosswalks there. So there are things that we've been adding to this to make it slower and safer. That's the most public thing I can say about it right now. On April 1, we will have another community meeting where we are going to solicit more feedback from the 2 options. Neither of them are perfect. I mean, the way that I also talk about it is micro versus macro. From a macro level, the city wants more bike lanes connectivity. From a micro level, the neighbors want their own parking and they want their own neighborhood.
Right.
And you got to balance those 2. I think that there's a solution that will get us a little further than both of the options that are on the table. I'm trying to be very representative of the immediate neighbors. The people on Richmond who would be having their parking taken away from them on whichever side it was decided, that's problematic for me. I don't want to be the guy that's going to take away certain quality of life issues for people. But the bike, we have a plan. We spend a lot of money on putting in bike paths. It is something that we as a city believe is part of our future. This is a really hard one, and I've heard people say, well, let's just take a look at the survey. And I know what the survey results are. And I could just say, whatever the results of the survey are is the decision that we're going to go with. That's kind of a cop-out. It's not really doing the job. But it is tempting just to follow the survey.
Yep. All right, Dave, thanks a lot.
Yeah,
I appreciate you joining us this afternoon. I want to remind our viewers, our listeners, our readers that election day is May 1. Early voting starts April 19th, and we want to encourage everybody to get out and vote. Thanks.
Thanks, Sam.